The Galactic Council's Great Hall was abuzz with activity, its towering marble pillars gleaming under the pale glow of distant stars. Leaders of countless worlds gathered to hear the final will of King Valrax, ruler of the prosperous and war-torn planet Tarkon. Despite his reputation as a shrewd leader, Valrax had been known for two things: his relentless conquests and his estranged daughter, Princess Nyra. Nyra was a legend in her own right, but not for the usual reasons of royal charm or beauty. She was infamous for being, well, different. When Valrax's will was read, many expected him to bestow his massive fortune or political power on the intergalactic aristocracy. But instead, the room fell into stunned silence at a twist that even the most cynical among them could not have foreseen. And to Earthling Sam Kerrigan, the humble human mechanic from the distant planet Earth, I leave my daughter, Nyra Valrax, as his lawful wife. Sam Kerrigan, seated in the back of the room, blinked in disbelief. He wasn't a politician, a warrior, or anyone of galactic significance. He was just an ordinary human. His presence here was the result of a strange twist of fate, a chance encounter with the late king during a starship repair job years ago. Valrax had taken a liking to him and, though Sam had no idea why, they'd stayed in touch. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine that this connection would lead to him inheriting a royal bride, and certainly not the most ridiculed woman in the galaxy. The murmurs of the council turned into laughter. Representatives from advanced civilizations with blue skin, multi-limbed forms, and psychic abilities looked at Sam with open derision. To them, humans were a primitive species barely worth acknowledging, and now one of them had inherited the ugly daughter of a once great king. Nyra, they all knew, was a royal enigma. She was tall, hulking in stature, and had a face that many found hard to look at without wincing. Her scales, once considered Tarkonian nobility's pride, were dull and mismatched in color. Her eyes, glowing amber, were often compared to predatory creatures that sent shivers down the spine of even the bravest Tarkon soldiers. The rumors of her temper and brooding silence only made her more of a pariah. Sam, however, was too stunned to join the council's laughter. The laughter echoed around him, growing louder and more mocking with each passing second. He could feel the weight of their disdain pressing down on him, as though the very walls of the hall were closing in. "What's the matter, human?" one of the council members sneered. "Too shocked by your good fortune? Or should we say misfortune?" Another snickered. Sam had no words. He was an outsider in this universe of royal politics, interstellar intrigue, and alien diplomacy. As a mechanic, he had always dealt with problems in straightforward terms. Fix it or scrap it. But how could he fix this? King Valrax's death had been sudden, and the news had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The old king had ruled Tarkon with an iron fist for over 3 decades, and his daughter had been kept hidden away from the public eye for most of her life. Nyra had no suitors, no friends, and certainly no admirers. In fact, the mere mention of her name was enough to elicit grimaces among the Tarkonian elite. And now she was Sam's responsibility. Amidst the jeering, Sam caught sight of Nyra standing silently at the edge of the hall. Her towering figure cast a long shadow, her eyes glowing like embers from behind the veil she wore. Despite the council's ridicule, she showed no sign of emotion. Her stillness was almost unnerving. Sam swallowed hard. What was he supposed to do now? Was this some kind of cosmic joke? Inheriting a royal fortune was one thing, but being handed a wife, especially one like Nyra, known for her alien appearance and reclusive nature, was beyond comprehension. Before he could fully grasp the situation, the voice of High Chancellor Ixar cut through the din of laughter. His voice was cold and amused, as if the whole affair were a great entertainment to him. "Earthling," he began, his elongated fingers drumming on the table in front of him. "Do you accept this gift from the late King Valrax? You do have a choice, after all. You can deny the will and return to your little planet, with nothing." Sam felt the eyes of every council member on him. They expected him to refuse, to back out of the arrangement like any sane being would. After all, this was Nyra Valrax, the woman no one wanted. For a moment, Sam considered it. He could refuse, leave Tarkon behind, and return to his quiet life. But then he looked at Nyra again, standing tall despite the ridicule surrounding her. Something about her stoicism stirred something in him. He wasn't a man who backed away from a challenge, and this felt like one of the biggest challenges of his life. "I accept," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. The laughter stopped. The council members stared at him, mouths open in shock. Even High Chancellor Ixar's expression faltered for a brief second. "You accept?" Ixar repeated, as though he hadn't heard correctly. Sam nodded. "I accept the will of King Valrax." Naira's eyes flickered for the briefest of moments, but she remained silent. The hall, which had moments ago been filled with mocking laughter, was now silent as a tomb. No one had expected the human to accept such an absurd inheritance. "Very well," Ixar said, leaning back in his chair with a sly smile. "Let it be known across the galaxy that Sam Kerrigan, the human from Earth, has inherited the king's daughter. May fortune smile upon him, for he will surely need it." The council session ended, and as the leaders dispersed, their whispers and chuckles echoed in the vast hall. Sam stood there, still trying to process the gravity of what he had just agreed to. A lifetime of ridicule, responsibility, and an alien bride awaited him. And for some reason, instead of dread, he felt something else entirely, a sense of determination. Chapter 2. Meeting the Princess. After the council adjourned, Sam was whisked away to the palace by a group of Tarkonian attendants. The tension weighed heavily on his shoulders as they led him down corridors adorned with alien tapestries and murals of Tarkonian history. Everything was intimidatingly grand, from the vaulted ceilings to the alien architecture that dwarfed him. Despite the beauty of his surroundings, all Sam could think about was the moment he would meet Princess Naira face to face. He was led to a large chamber with high windows that overlooked the capital city of Tarkon Prime. The view was breathtaking. Towers made of crystalline structures stretched into the sky, and glowing orbs of energy flew between them, acting as transport. The city's alien beauty, however, did little to calm his nerves. "She will be here shortly," one of the attendants said, bowing stiffly before leaving him alone in the room. Sam sighed, pacing back and forth. How was he supposed to act? What was he supposed to say? He didn't even know what the expectations were for this marriage. The whole situation was surreal, and the council's laughter still rang in his ears. He felt like he had been thrown into a game where he didn't know the rules, and worse, he wasn't sure if anyone else was playing fair. After what felt like an eternity, the doors slid open, and Naira entered. Her presence filled the room. She stood tall, her frame imposing, even more so without the cloak and veil she had worn at the council. Her alien features were on full display now, her mottled, scaled skin shimmering under the room's lighting. Her amber eyes glowed faintly, giving her an otherworldly aura. Her sharp jawline, which had been the source of many rumors, was far more angular than any human's, and her ridged forehead gave her a fierce, almost warrior-like appearance. Sam's breath caught. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by human standards, far from it. But in that moment, standing before her, he could see that the descriptions of her as ugly were exaggerated, even cruel. She was different, certainly, but ugly? Not exactly. For a moment, the two just stared at each other in silence, neither knowing quite what to say. Sam could feel the weight of the galaxy's expectations on his shoulders, and he imagined Naira felt something similar. This was, after all, just as unexpected for her as it was for him. Naira finally broke the silence. Her voice was deep and resonant, with a slight tremor beneath the surface, perhaps from years of being shunned and ridiculed. "So, you are the one who accepted." Sam nodded awkwardly, unsure of how to respond. Yeah, I guess I am." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she stepped forward, her presence even more overwhelming up close. "Do you understand what you've done, human? You have tied yourself to the daughter of the most hated king in the galaxy. The council mocks you, the universe will mock you. I am not desirable by any standards." Sam swallowed hard, feeling the intensity of her words. But instead of recoiling, he found himself standing firm. "I'm not one to back down from a challenge, even if I don't fully understand it yet." Naira's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "You could have walked away," she said, her voice softening. "No one would have blamed you." "Maybe," Sam replied, "but I don't care what they think. I'm not here to impress the council. I'm here because, well, I'm here because your father chose me. And for whatever reason, he thought I could do something that no one else could." Naira blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. She studied him for a moment, her amber eyes searching his face for signs of deceit or mockery. When she found none, her posture relaxed, if only slightly. "You're different from the others," she finally said. "Most would have turned away the moment they laid eyes on me." Sam shrugged, trying to ease the tension in the room. "Maybe that's because I've seen a lot of strange things in my life. I'm a mechanic, after all. I fix things that others give up on." A brief silence followed as Naira seemed to process his words. For the first time, Sam noticed a hint of vulnerability in her expression, a crack in the icy exterior she had carefully maintained. "I don't need fixing human," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I didn't say you did," Sam replied quickly. "But maybe the situation we're in does." Naira tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words in a new light. Then, to his surprise, she let out a soft, bitter laugh. "You're a curious one, Sam Kerrigan." He smiled, feeling the tension ease slightly. "I've been called worse." For the next few minutes, they talked, cautiously at first, but with growing comfort. Naira was guarded, but Sam could sense that beneath her hardened exterior was someone who had endured a lifetime of isolation and ridicule. She had grown up in the shadow of her father's reputation, never truly belonging anywhere, not even in her own kingdom. As their conversation unfolded, Sam realized that the princess wasn't just a victim of her appearance. She had been shaped by years of being treated as an outcast, both by her own people and by the galaxy at large. Yet, despite it all, she had retained a sharp wit and a fierce intelligence that surprised him. "You really accepted this fate," Naira said, almost as if testing him one last time. "Why?" Sam paused, considering his answer. "I think, because I believe there's more to you than what everyone else sees. And maybe I'm not the only one who thinks that. Your father saw it too." Her gaze softened for a moment, but then she turned away, walking toward the large window that overlooked Tarkon Prime. "My father, he had a strange sense of justice. He gave me to you because he knew no one else would want me. Maybe it was his way of protecting me, or maybe it was his last cruel joke." Sam walked up beside her, the vast cityscape stretching before them. "Maybe he wanted to give you a chance at something different." Naira didn't respond immediately, but her silence spoke volumes. The years of being rejected and treated as an outcast had left deep scars, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was a part of her that wanted to believe in something more. Something beyond the mockery and derision that had defined her life. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "We'll see, Sam Kerrigan. We'll see if you're as different as you claim to be." Chapter 3, The Council's Challenge. The days following Sam's acceptance of Naira were filled with uncertainty. The whispers in the corridors of the palace were constant, and the council had made no effort to hide their disdain for the human who had dared to inherit the ugly daughter. The tension between Sam and Naira remained, but there was a fragile understanding between them, a mutual respect that slowly began to take root. However, the Galactic Council had no intention of making things easy for the newly wedded couple. One afternoon, Sam received an official summons to appear before the council once more. The message was cryptic, but it bore the seal of High Chancellor Ixar, the same chancellor who had mocked him during the will reading. As he entered the council chambers, Naira by his side, Sam could feel the weight of the council's collective gaze on him. "Ah, Sam Kerrigan, our most unexpected royal." Chancellor Ixar greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a matter to discuss with you and your bride." Sam exchanged a quick glance with Naira, whose expression remained unreadable, though he could sense the tension in her stance. They both knew this wouldn't be a simple discussion. Ixar motioned for them to step forward, and once they were standing in the center of the room, he leaned back in his chair, his long fingers steepled in front of him. "The council has reviewed the terms of King Valrax's will," Ixar began, his voice smooth and calculated. "And while we are entertained by the idea of a human claiming Tarkonian royalty, there are certain matters of state that must be addressed." Sam kept his expression neutral, though his mind raced. This sounded like the beginning of a trap. Ixar continued, "It is tradition on Tarkon that the royal heir must prove their worthiness through a series of trials. Since Princess Naira is now tied to you, we believe it is only fitting that you, too, must undergo these trials to be recognized as her equal." The council members murmured in agreement, some smirking, others watching with interest to see how the human would react. "What kind of trials?" Sam asked cautiously. Ixar's smile widened, and it sent a chill down Sam's spine. "Simple tasks, really. Physical, mental, and diplomatic challenges, each designed to test your abilities and your resilience. Should you pass, you will be recognized as a worthy consort to the princess, and the kingdom of Tarkon will grant you full honors. But should you fail? His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Failure would mean disgrace, not only for Sam but also for Naira. The council would have its excuse to strip Naira of her remaining royal status and humiliate her even further. Sam glanced at Naira, who stood tall beside him, her face a mask of calm. But he could see the tension in her clenched fists, and he knew that this trial was as much about her as it was about him. Naira spoke before Sam could answer. "These trials are a farce," she said, her voice steady. "They are designed to humiliate, not to test worthiness." Ixar raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Far be it from us to insult your honor, princess, but the traditions of Tarkon are clear. Your consort must prove himself, just as any other royal would." Sam took a deep breath. This was exactly what the council wanted, to put him in an impossible situation where failure seemed inevitable. But he wasn't about to back down. "I'll take the trials," Sam said firmly. Naira turned to him, her amber eyes narrowing. "You don't have to do this, Sam." But Sam shook his head. "If this is what it takes, then I'll do it." The council chamber erupted into murmurs once more, some surprised by his boldness, others amused by what they saw as his foolishness. "Very well," Ixar said with a sly grin. "The trials will begin tomorrow. Prepare yourself, human. You will need all the strength you can muster." That evening, back in their chambers, Naira paced the room while Sam sat quietly, thinking about what awaited him. He had no idea what the trials would entail, but from what little he knew of Tarkonian culture, he expected them to be brutal. "You shouldn't have agreed to this," Naira said, her voice tight with frustration. "They're setting you up to fail." Sam looked up at her. "And if I didn't agree, what would happen? They'd keep mocking us, keep pushing us around. I'm not going to let them win that easily." Naira stopped pacing, her gaze softening slightly. "You don't understand. The trials aren't just tests, they're designed to break you. Even Tarkonian warriors have failed them." "Then I'll just have to do my best," Sam replied, standing up to face her. "Look, I'm not a fighter or a politician, but I'm not going to let them use me to humiliate you. I know they want me to fail, but I won't give them that satisfaction." Naira's eyes searched his face, as though she was trying to decide whether he was truly serious. Finally, she sighed and nodded. "If you're going to do this, then we'll prepare. I'll teach you what I can about the trials. But, Sam, you need to know that the odds are against you." Sam smiled, though he knew the gravity of the situation. "When have the odds ever been in my favor?" For the first time since he had met her, Naira allowed herself a small smile, albeit a sad one. "You're a fool, Sam Kerrigan." "Maybe," Sam said, "but I'm your fool now." Chapter 4. Trial of the Warlord's Heir. The next day, Sam found himself in the center of an ancient arena on the outskirts of the capital. It was a place where Tarkonian warriors had once fought for honor, and now it would be the stage for his first trial. The stone walls of the arena loomed high above him, casting long shadows that made the atmosphere feel even more oppressive. The first trial was called the Trial of the Warlord's Heir, a physical test designed to measure strength, endurance, and combat skills. Sam had no formal training in combat. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. But Naira had spent the previous night preparing him as best she could, teaching him the basics of Tarkonian fighting techniques and strategies. Still, he felt woefully unprepared. As he stood in the middle of the arena, waiting for the trial to begin, he could hear the crowd of council members and Tarkonian nobles gathering to watch. They were eager to see him fail. High Chancellor Ixar was there, seated in a high balcony, looking down at Sam with a smug expression. "Begin the trial," Ixar called out. The ground beneath Sam rumbled, and a massive Tarkonian warrior stepped into the arena. He was twice Sam's size, his skin covered in thick, armored scales, and his eyes glowing with a fierce, predatory light. The warrior carried a massive battle staff, its ends crackling with energy. Sam swallowed hard. This was not going to be easy. The warrior let out a roar and charged at him, his staff swinging with lethal precision. Sam barely managed to dodge the first blow, feeling the rush of air as the staff passed dangerously close to his head. He stumbled back, trying to regain his footing, but the warrior was relentless. Naira had warned him that Tarkonian warriors fought with brute force, relying on their superior strength to overwhelm their opponents. Sam knew he couldn't match the warrior in raw power, so he would have to rely on his agility and wits. The next strike came, and Sam ducked under it, rolling to the side. He grabbed a nearby shield that had been left in the arena, raising it just in time to block the warrior's follow-up attack. The force of the blow rattled his bones, but he held firm. For what felt like hours, Sam dodged and parried, using every ounce of his strength to stay alive. The warrior was faster and stronger, but Sam was determined not to give up. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to turn the tide. Finally, an opportunity presented itself. The warrior swung his staff wide, leaving himself open for a brief moment. Sam didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, using the shield to bash the warrior in the side. The blow didn't do much damage, but it knocked the warrior off balance just enough for Sam to grab the staff and wrench it from his hands. With a yell, Sam spun the staff around and brought it down on the warrior's leg, causing him to stumble. The crowd gasped in surprise, and even Ixar's smug expression faltered. Sam knew this was his chance. He couldn't overpower the warrior, but he could outthink him. With one final strike, Sam brought the staff down on the warrior's armored chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The arena fell silent as the warrior struggled to rise, but Sam stood over him, the staff pointed at his throat. "I yield," the warrior growled, his voice full of grudging respect. Sam stepped back, breathing heavily as the weight of the moment hit him. He had won. The crowd erupted into shocked murmurs, and Ixar's expression darkened. He had clearly expected Sam to fail, but Sam wasn't done yet. He still had more trials to face. After the physically grueling first trial, Sam had little time to recover. The next challenge was already looming. The diplomatic trial, known as the Trial of the Chosen Word. This test was not of strength or endurance, but of intellect, wit, and cunning qualities that many in the Galactic Council assumed Sam, a human, lacked. Escorted by Naira and several palace guards, Sam was led to a grand hall known as the Parliament of Ancients, a place where Tarkonian royalty had settled disputes for centuries. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering and history, with ornate carvings of long-forgotten wars and legendary kings lining its walls. However, today, it served a different purpose. It was to be the battleground for words. Seated at the far end of the long council table was High Chancellor Ixar, who presided over the trial with a smug sense of satisfaction. He had hoped to crush Sam in the physical trial, but Sam's unexpected victory had rattled him. Now, he was determined to see the human fail where true Tarkonian elites excelled politics. The hall filled with nobles, diplomats, and council members from across the galaxy. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Even Naira looked uneasy, standing beside Sam as the trial was about to begin. The trial of the chosen word, Ixar began, is a test of wit, negotiation, and diplomacy. You, Sam Kerrigan, will be tasked with brokering peace between two feuding factions, something that has eluded our greatest diplomats for decades. The factions, the Tarkonian Iron Clans and the Vraxian Confederates, have been at war for over a century. Your goal is to convince their leaders to sign a ceasefire. Sam stared at the High Chancellor. It was an impossible task. Decades of violence, hatred, and deep-seated grudges weren't something that could be solved with a few well-chosen words. "And what makes you think I have a chance of doing this?" Sam asked, his tone measured but skeptical. Ixar smirked, his long fingers drumming against the table. "We don't, but it will be quite entertaining to watch you try." The crowd chuckled, and Sam could feel the weight of their condescension pressing down on him. But he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him falter. If they wanted him to fail, he'd give them a fight they wouldn't forget. The two faction leaders entered the room. General Vac of the Iron Clans, a hulking Tarkonian warlord with dark, scarred scales and a gaze that could pierce through stone, and Admiral Trell of the Vraxian Confederates, a slender, calculating figure with sharp, silver eyes and a reputation for cruelty. The two leaders took their seats at opposite ends of the table, glaring at each other with barely concealed hatred. The room buzzed with tension, and even Naira seemed unsure of how Sam could navigate this impossible task. "You may begin, Earthling," Ixar said, leaning back in his chair with a self-satisfied smirk. Sam took a deep breath and approached the table, aware that every eye in the room was on him. The odds were stacked against him, and he had no experience in dealing with alien politics or brokering peace between warlords. But what he did have was a lifetime of dealing with stubborn people and solving problems in creative ways. He began by addressing General Vac, the more aggressive of the two leaders. "General," Sam said, his voice calm and respectful, "I know your people have suffered greatly in this conflict. The Iron Clans have been known for their strength and honor. But continuing this war will only lead to more loss, for both sides." Vac narrowed his eyes, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "You think I care about honor, human? My people need blood for the blood that's been spilled. The Vraxians will pay for their crimes." Sam didn't flinch, and they will. But the question is, how many more of your people will die before that happens? Every day this war drags on. More Tarkonian children lose their fathers. More villages are destroyed. Is that what you want for your people? To fight endlessly until there's nothing left? Vac grunted, his eyes flickering with a hint of doubt. Sam could see he was making progress, but it wouldn't be enough to sway a hardened warlord. He needed something more. Turning to Admiral Trell, Sam addressed her with equal respect. "Admiral, the Vraxians are known for their cunning and strategy, but even the most brilliant strategist knows when it's time to cut their losses. This war has bled both sides dry. If you continue, you'll have no resources left to rebuild when it's over." Trell leaned back in her chair, her silver eyes cold and calculating. "You speak as though I have a choice, human. The Iron Clans have been relentless. Peace with them is impossible." Sam smiled slightly, realizing the opportunity in her words. Maybe that's because no one's ever tried to offer them something worth making peace for. He looked between the two leaders, feeling the room's attention sharpen as he continued. "Both of you want victory. That much is clear. But victory doesn't have to mean total annihilation. You're both powerful, both capable of leading your people to something greater. What if, instead of destroying each other, you used that power to build something new? A united front that could dominate the stars?" The crowd murmured in surprise, and Sam pressed on. "You're both fighting for control of the same territory. But what if you shared that control? An alliance of Iron Clan warriors and Vraxian strategists could be unstoppable. The galaxy would have no choice but to bow to your combined strength." Vac and Trell exchanged glances, and for the first time, Sam saw a flicker of interest in their eyes. They hadn't considered the possibility of an alliance. They had been too blinded by their hatred for each other. Naira, standing behind Sam, watched with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. The human was doing what no Tarkonian diplomat had ever managed to do. He was making them think. Vac was the first to speak. "An alliance with the Vraxians?" He scowled, but there was a trace of curiosity in his voice. "What do you propose, human?" Sam nodded, sensing that he had found a way in. "A ceasefire, for starters. Both sides pull back their forces and agree to stop the fighting. In exchange, we set up neutral zones for trade and cooperation. Over time, you could build a shared empire, one that could challenge even the Galactic Council's authority." Trell's silver eyes gleamed with interest. "You're suggesting we work together to undermine the Council?" Sam shrugged. "The Council wants you to destroy each other. They profit from your conflict. But if you unite, you become a force they can't control." The room fell silent as the two leaders considered his proposal. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He knew this was a long shot, but it was the only way forward. He wasn't just trying to win a trial. He was trying to broker real peace. Finally, Vac grunted and nodded. "I will consider the ceasefire." Trell's lips curled into a smile. "As will I." Ixar's expression darkened, and Sam could see the Chancellor was furious that his plan had backfired. The crowd, however, was stunned. A human lowly mechanic had just done what no one thought possible. After successfully navigating the physical and diplomatic trials, Sam found himself facing the most daunting challenge yet, the final trial. Known as the Trial of the Inner Mind, it was a test of mental fortitude, designed to break even the strongest of warriors by forcing them to confront their deepest fears, doubts, and insecurities. It was said that those who survived emerged stronger, but many were left shattered, consumed by the visions they faced. Sam stood at the entrance to an ancient chamber deep within the palace, the air thick with anticipation. Naira walked beside him, her face unusually tense. She knew this trial well. Tarkonian legends told of great warriors who had entered the chamber only to be undone by the shadows of their minds. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Naira asked quietly, her voice betraying a hint of concern. "This trial is different from the others. It's not something you can outwit or outfight." Sam met her gaze, his expression determined. "I've come this far, Naira. If I don't do this, the Council will use it to strip us of everything. I'm not backing down now. She gave him a long look, then nodded. Then I'll wait for you. Just be careful. Sam took a deep breath as he stepped into the chamber. Inside, a massive crystal device known as the Mind Prism awaited him. Its surface shimmered with an unnatural light, reflecting the anxieties and hidden thoughts of those who stood before it. Ancient Tarkonians had used the Mind Prism to test their leader's mental resolve, and now it would test Sam. The doors to the chamber slid shut, leaving him alone with the prism. As he approached it, the eerie glow intensified, and he could feel the strange, electric pull of its power. The moment he placed his hand on its surface, everything around him shifted. Sam found himself standing in a vast, featureless void. The darkness stretched endlessly in every direction, and an unsettling silence surrounded him. For a moment, he thought he was alone until figures began to emerge from the shadows, twisting and warping into familiar shapes. His surroundings morphed into the cluttered workshop back on Earth where he had spent most of his early years. The sight was comforting at first, but soon he noticed something was wrong. The tools lay broken and scattered. The machines he had once repaired rusted and useless. The people around him, his co-workers, his family, his friends, stared at him with expressions of disdain and disappointment. One of them, his former boss from the repair shop, stepped forward, his face twisted in mockery. "Look at you, Sam. You think you can stand shoulder to shoulder with kings and warriors? You're nothing but a mechanic. Always have been, always will be." The others chimed in, their voices overlapping in a chorus of judgment. "You think you're special because you inherited a title? You're a joke. No one believes in you. They're just waiting for you to fail. You're out of your league, Sam. You don't belong here." Sam felt a pit form in his stomach as their words echoed in his mind. Doubt began to creep in, wrapping around him like a heavy fog. These were the fears he had always carried deep inside, fears of inadequacy, of not being enough, of always being seen as just a mechanic. The voices of his past tormented him, pulling at every insecurity he had tried to bury. But Sam clenched his fists and forced himself to breathe. He had faced ridicule before. He had grown up in a world where people underestimated him, but he had always pushed through. The truth was, he didn't need to be the strongest or the smartest, he just needed to be resilient. "I've heard all this before," Sam muttered, narrowing his eyes at the apparitions. "And guess what? I'm still standing." As he spoke, the figures began to waver, their voices growing fainter. The workshop faded away, replaced by a different scene, one that hit Sam even harder. He now stood in the grand halls of the Galactic Council, surrounded by the mocking faces of the council members. High Chancellor Ixar was at the forefront, his thin smile widening as he pointed an accusatory finger at Sam. "You think you've earned your place here, human?" Ixar sneered. "The only reason you're standing in this hall is because of an absurd twist of fate. You're nothing more than a pawn in a cosmic game, and everyone here knows it." The council members jeered, their laughter filling the air. Sam's heart raced as doubts clawed at him. Was Ixar right? Had this all been some cruel joke from the beginning? Was he just a pawn in a galaxy that viewed him as insignificant? And then, through the crowd, Sam saw Naira. But this version of Naira was cold, distant, her amber eyes devoid of emotion. She stepped forward, her voice sharp and cutting. "You think you can help me?" Naira asked, her tone filled with disdain. "You think you're worthy of being my consort? You're nothing, Sam Kerrigan. You're not strong enough, not smart enough. You'll fail, just like everyone expects you to." The words hit Sam like a punch to the gut. The thought of failing Naira, of being seen as a weak link in her life, was the one thing he feared most. He had always been an underdog, but here, on Tarkon, it felt like the stakes were so much higher. But then something inside him clicked. These weren't real. This wasn't the Naira he had come to know, the one who had survived a lifetime of rejection and ridicule, just like him. This was the Mind Prism feeding on his fears, trying to break him. Sam took a deep breath, steadying himself. "You're not real," he said, his voice firm. "The Naira I know is stronger than this. And so am I." As he spoke, the illusion of Naira began to dissolve, her cold expression fading into nothingness. The mocking faces of the council members blurred and disappeared, leaving Sam standing alone in the darkness once again. The void shifted once more, and Sam found himself back in the empty chamber with the Mind Prism. The glowing light had dimmed, and the oppressive pressure that had weighed on him was gone. He had passed the trial. The doors to the chamber opened, and Sam stepped out, his legs weak but his mind clear. Naira was waiting for him, her expression unreadable, though there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "How do you feel?" she asked quietly. Sam smiled, though exhaustion tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Like I've been through hell, but I'm still standing." Naira studied him for a moment, then nodded, her face softening slightly. "You did well, Sam Kerrigan." As they walked out of the chamber together, the weight of the trials began to lift from Sam's shoulders. He had faced the physical, the diplomatic, and the mental challenges that the council had thrown at him. And despite the odds, he had come through each one stronger. As they reached the grand hall where the Galactic Council awaited, Sam knew that this wasn't just a victory for him, it was a victory for Naira as well. The council had sought to break them both, to humiliate and cast them aside. But together, they had proven that they were more than the sum of their insecurities and fears. High Chancellor Ixar stood waiting, his expression tight with frustration. The council members, who had once mocked Sam, now watched him with a mixture of surprise and begrudging respect. "Sam Kerrigan," Ixar said, his voice strained, "you have passed the trials. You are recognized as the consort of Princess Naira." The words, though bitter in Ixar's mouth, carried the weight of tradition. Sam and Naira were now officially bound, and the council had no choice but to acknowledge their status. As Sam stood there, Naira by his side, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. The galaxy might never see him as anything more than a human, but he had earned his place and no one could take that from him. Epilogue. A new beginning. The trials were over, but the journey had only just begun. As Sam and Naira left the palace, they knew that there were still many challenges ahead. The Galactic Council would continue to watch them, waiting for any sign of weakness. But for the first time in his life, Sam felt like he belonged, like he had found a place where he could make a difference. As they walked together through the bustling city of Tarkon Prime, Naira glanced at him, her amber eyes thoughtful. "You've surprised me, Sam Kerrigan." He smiled. "I tend to do that." She paused for a moment, then said softly, "Thank you for everything." Sam nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "We're in this together, Naira. Always." And with that, they walked forward, into a future filled with possibilities no longer defined by the expectations of others, but by the strength of their partnership and the challenges they would face side by side.